Welcome back to Silent Sales Machine Radio. We are your co-hosts. I'm Brian.
And I'm Robin Joy.
And this is Coach's Corner.
Hi, everybody.
So we have a topic today. We're going to talk about frameworks. Frameworks are important as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, for us as coaches, to help people get started in their business. And we were watching the show on television last night, where Robin called out the framework that took place right in the middle of this.
I see frameworks.
Yeah. Well, so let me just set the scene with this. There was someone going like up and down a ladder.
Yeah,
right?
Like at a really tall
structure. Yeah. And there was a new person there who was kind of freaked out about being so high up and everything. And the vet was telling him, like, look, it's pretty simple. 3 points of contact. Always have 3 points of contact. Yeah. And Robin goes, framework.
Right. How do you climb a ladder? These are the things that most of us will do if we're climbing a ladder, or at least experienced people. They do this. They just don't have, an identification of what they're doing so they can help someone else do it. This veteran ladder climber had a framework that he could share with the new people that he was training. So he had a way of explaining what was to happen. 3 points of contact. This, most people probably do that always, but we're like, hey, that's a good idea. I don't usually climb ladders, but I need to make sure have 3 points of contact all the time.
It was kind of like the minimum viable product for safety when you're climbing a ladder, right? 3 points of contact. And so
it'll prevent a whole lot of other issues.
Exactly. And you can build off of that, and you can go different directions from that. But that's like kind of at a minimum.
And you can plug in your own requirements. What are those 3 points? 2 hands and a foot, 2 feet and a hand, a nose and a foot. Who knows? The framework is there. You plug in what you think is important in those three points of contact.
Right. And so we want to just sort of break that down a little bit today into some examples of frameworks that we've already developed, and then talk about a couple of areas in the Amazon business where we don't have any frameworks developed, and see what might come of this conversation. It's going to be very ad hoc, collaborative, on the fly, off script.
Right?
All right, let's talk about some of the frameworks we already have.
Okay.
What's the first one? The most obvious one?
3 types of ASINs.
Oh, that's not the most obvious one.
The 3-step check.
Okay.
That's the best one to me as an example, the 3-step check. Yeah. Because we put together a framework and we called it the 3-step check. It's things that people are already doing without, identifying them. But we wanted to help new people understand how to choose an ASIN to test. So we put 3-step check together, which is velocity.
Sales
velocity, capital protection, and potential for profit. That's the framework. Now, how fast is fast enough? How much velocity is good enough for you to say, yes, I want to test this? You plug in the number.
Definable by the user. Right?
Definable by, exactly.
Yeah.
The framework is there. The user of the framework defines what goes in that slot. So how many sales rank drops, for instance, say on average, are enough for you to say, yes, it has enough velocity that I'll test it. Some people that's, 40, some people that's 20, some people that's 100, I mean, whatever that is, you put that in. The second one is capital protection. That's different for everybody. We start people off by saying, make sure that you don't see in the recent past that the sales number on the Keep It chart drops below your break-even price for 7 days or more at a time. That can be adjusted. What's the recent past? We say 90 days when we're training new people, but you can plug in, maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 180 days, maybe it's, you have different ones for different types of ASINs. How long can it be below the break-even price before you say it's not testable? A lot of people I work with say, I'm happy to go $1 below the break-even point. It's good enough to test for me. And I have other people who say, no, I'm not going to go below the break-even price at all. In history, have evidence of that. Because it's not scientific. Just because it happens in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. It just gives us an indication of what we can, with experience, see that it's going to happen in
And
the
then
future.
the third was the potential profit, right?
Yeah.
Opportunity for profit. Again, completely definable by the user.
Yes.
And one of the things I like about this, and, it is something that you came up with, so it's not like I'm impartial or we came up with, but each of those is definable by the user and potentially by different information sources. So when we say sales velocity, we didn't tie it down to specifically sales rank drops, because we could get sales velocity from other places, potentially directly from Amazon.
Potentially. Or from our own data.
Or from our own data, exactly. So we're saying sales velocity, you figure out what you're going to use to you. Now, we say, here's the starting point. You can use keep a sales rank drops, right?
Yes. In our workshop, we'd say, here's where we think you should start. That doesn't mean that, we're your boss and you have to do it that way. You can, and people do, as time goes by, say, all right, I need to adjust this a little from my experience.
Yeah. And same thing with the other two points on that piece of framework, right? Definable by the user, you figure out where that information's coming from, you make the decision on it, but it's kind of like the minimum viable product that you need in order to make progress, to go forward, right? So you're not weighed down in I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
If you've got, your decision points already made, then you can go through those decision points and know, actually, if you have the decision points established, then you just apply the criteria and say yes or no.
Right.
Right, in this case.
So in this case, you have to have a procedure for finding velocity, a procedure for finding capital protection, however you've defined it.
Yeah.
But that's different than the framework. So let's talk about how we create frameworks when we're going to create a framework.
Well, hold on. I wanted to get into some of these other ones too, just to finish it up. So we've got the framework for, let's say, the different types of ASINs. Okay. I think, is this really a framework, or is this more of a definition?
I'm not sure. Let's think about that. So we have three types of ASINs: viable ASINs, testable ASINs, and replenishable ASINs. So you still user plug-in. What's a viable ASIN to you?
Yep.
We say when you've got a source and an ASIN that match, regardless of anything else, they're a good source and a good ASIN that you would sell if it were, something that made profit for you. That's a viable ASIN. From viable ASINs, we get testable ASINs. What's your definition of a testable ASIN?
Yeah.
You use the 3-step check for that. You will decide what your definition of that is. And the third is replenishable ASINs.
Yeah.
What's your minimum requirement to replenish ASINs? So I would say it is a framework.
I think it is a framework, yeah. Okay. Yeah. We also have, let's say, the 4-week test.
Yeah.
4-week test is, maybe it's a bit of a process or a procedure. Excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat this morning.
I think it's at starting point a framework, because first of all, maybe the four weeks of it can be defined. So the testing process. So we made a 4-week testing process where we start at a higher price and adjust every week for 4 weeks. If it doesn't sell, we sell out. That's the procedure. The 4-week test of where you start your price, where you adjust your price, how long you stay in, that you can choose yourself. It doesn't have to be 4 weeks. It doesn't have to be sell out in 30 days. It's your choice how you test.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
I'm buying that.
All right.
Okay. So then what we're talking about is there are some places where we do not have any frameworks.
That we've developed, right?
That we've developed and put into any sort of shareable format, right? Do you want to get into some of those right now?
Yeah, well, then let's talk about how we would apply a framework to that. How would we develop a framework?
And I think one of the reasons that this is appealing to me as a coach, as a business coach, is that once we can, we start people with some sort of fundamental frameworks, then teach people how to make their own frameworks, and then they're off and running, right? It's like a lot of times people get mired down in the details of this, and really we're trying to simplify this so much so that it has the most fundamentals that, again, has some room for definition, within there. But
yeah, because your experience is going to be different than mine.
Exactly.
Always.
Yes. Right.
Every time your overall experience is going to be different than my overall experience.
So we did this series previously that we called the 7 core competencies.
Yes.
And the 7 core competencies, just to review, or start with sourcing, shopping, prepping, shipping, pricing, replenishing, and then business acumen, all the sort of behind the scenes stuff that happens there, right?
Right.
But we didn't include one, arguably important step in there. Nuance.
A subtle nuance between
shopping and prepping. Yeah.
Right. And that's receiving. Right. So as we were talking through this morning, we realized I'm not sure if it's a core competency, but it is part of somewhere between. I'm not sure if it's part of shopping or prepping, but it kind of fits in between. Anyway,
I think it does fit in between there. But why is it important to have a good receiving process?
Well, think about this, Brian. If you have received an item in the mail and you prep it and you ship it off and do nothing else, what could happen down the line is that Amazon asks for your receipts to prove authenticity, right? So you say, all right, I've got receipts for where I sold that cake, where I bought that cake mix.
Yep.
But that's not what they ask for. They ask for, you've sold 20 cake mixes in the last year, and we want to see receipts for all 20 cake mixes.
Well, not only that, plus whatever you have in inventory right now that you haven't sold.
Right. So anything that you've provided to us in inventory, we need to see receipts for.
Yeah.
Within this time period, right? So you go back and you say, okay, well, I sent 20 cake mixes. I bought 20 cake mixes on this receipt at this time. I shipped in 20 cake mixes, but I only have a receipt for 19. The cashier missed one. What happens there?
Good question. Then you can't fulfill Amazon's request.
Right. You cannot prove authenticity on all of which you need to do. So back to the receiving part, if we can tackle that in receiving, when we receive things in the mail or when we come home from shopping even, we need to go through a process of receiving. Did I get everything I ordered? Did I get a receipt for everything I ordered? Can I match those up and verify that I have everything I need in order to send this in? It's part of the business.
So one thing that comes to mind for me here is, and I know I've talked about this before, because we come from the IT space, there's the information technology infrastructure, or I'm sorry, ITIL,
yes.
Right? I can't remember exactly what all
I don't know. We've got certifications that say ITIL.
But one of the things they really preach is start with the end in mind, right? And the end in mind, in this case, is Amazon potentially coming back and saying, we need you to prove A, chain of custody, B, authenticity.
Right. So the purpose is not to just go through the motions, because that's what people do, and there are whole jobs that are called receiving. The purpose is what needs to be identified. Why are we receiving? Why are we doing this process in receiving?
Right.
So then we need to put a process behind that, whether we're doing it or somebody else is doing it. We need someone who's checking the box and saying, what does receiving mean to me? That's the procedure. The framework step is receiving. The procedure is, what does that, does that mean checking the invoice next to what you brought home, putting it in a separate pile, checking a checkbox on a...
Well, I think there's maybe more simplified than that. There's the, what do we need to ensure that we can have happen here? We need to ensure that we have matching receipts or invoices for the amount of inventory that we're sending in on every single shipment. Now, however you're going to do that, that's up to you. Right. But you need to have matching receipts or invoices exactly to the number of units that you're sending in. That's the framework.
Yes.
Right? Match receipts or invoices with quantities being shipped in.
And again, the purpose of that is you may not ever be asked for those receipts. You will sometimes probably be asked for those receipts. Whatever you are asked for, you must have. So it is important, whether you use it or not, that you have a way to go and get that. You have a way that's been checked off, that before you send it in, that you've got everything you need in case that happens.
It seems so intuitive to us because we've been at this for going on 6 years, right?
Again.
But I see so many new people falling into the trap of, I got this free sample.
Yeah.
I'm going to send it in. Or like you said, oh, I bought 20 cake mixes, but the cashier missed one or two of those boxes. Basis. So I'm kind of happy. Oh, great. I only had to pay for 18, even though I really got 20 or, whatever it was. Right. But that was wrong. That was wrong for us, right, at the time. And now
we should not have done that.
We should not have done that. Yes, we only want to make sure that we're sending in because, as you know, they do get called by Amazon to prove chain of custody and authenticity. And if you're sending in the items that you got for free that are not on an invoice anywhere or pulling stuff out of your cabinet, you don't have it, you're going to be in trouble. And
a packing slip doesn't do it. You need a receipt or an invoice.
Yeah.
And there's criteria for that, kind of thing. But it is important. It is important to kind of think about what are the processes that we need to do? What are those core competencies? Why do we do that? What does it mean to prep? What am I trying to accomplish there? I'm trying to create protection for the item. I'm trying to make sure the customer has a good experience when they get it, and I'm trying to follow any guidelines that Amazon requires on that.
Right? Again, starting with the end in mind.
Yes.
Even though I'm not going to have to prove it on every single shipment, I need to make sure that nothing goes out the door without matching invoices or receipts.
Agreed.
That's the bottom line.
Right, I agree. So if we say that in the prep, we say, well, if I'm shipping a candle in a glass jar, what I'm trying to accomplish is making sure that the customer doesn't get a broken jar, doesn't get a melted candle, what are the purposes
what are we solving for?
What are we solving for? Exactly. Then we need a framework for that and a procedure behind the framework.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once you kind of know what your process is, what you're trying to solve for,
is
then just boil it down to distill it to the most basic or the most fundamental things.
And this is how we create frameworks, right? So when we went to create the framework of the 3-step check, we were trying to overcome an issue that we're facing with clients all the time. Many, many clients were having trouble pulling the trigger on the test. We knew they needed to test, but it's hard to pull the trigger when you don't feel safe, you don't feel confident. And there are so many things that could make a difference, and you don't know what you don't know. You're afraid there's something going to happen that you're lighting your $20 bill on fire, right? Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that.
So we said, what do we really need to know before we send a test? Right? We want to be able to send as many tests as we possibly can because we want the sale. Whether we made any money or not, we want to show Amazon successful transactions, right? We've been through that. But what is it that we really need to know before we test to make us feel comfortable doing that? And then we started realizing what we want to know is we want to make sure that we don't end up with something sitting in inventory forever. We want to make sure it's moving fast enough that we can get in and out and make our decision within a short period of time.
Started with the end in mind.
Right.
We know we wanted to be out of this ASIN in 45 days maximum after it becomes available.
Right.
We know that we wanted to at least get all of our money back.
Right.
We know that we wanted to have the opportunity to make a minimum amount of profit.
Right. Right. So we went from there and said, okay, where can we get this data? Are there simple ways we can say yes or no to each of these questions? Do I have enough velocity? Yes or no? Do I have capital protection? Yes or no? Do I have a potential for profit? Yes or no? In order to get those yes or no questions, we had to then create a procedure. We had to define how much velocity, what does capital protection mean, how much profit potential. Then we had to go and find the data that we have available to us, the evidence that we have enough velocity.
So same thing in the receiving part then. I have to validate that I got the product, that I got the right quantity, and that I got the receipt or invoice before I can go on to the next step.
Right. So tell me a story about someone who has needed to see this right away.
I'm not sure where you're going with that.
Tell me a story of some place where you know this has to happen in the receiving. Okay, I'm going after this. The client that you had that sent his first shipment in, and it got lost, the whole thing.
Oh, the whole shipment?
They lost the whole thing, the first shipment.
Yeah.
Amazon lost it.
Poor guy. He's fired up. I'm going to do this Amazon business. I'm going. He's sourcing. He's doing everything by the book. Sends in his first shipment of 4 boxes, and Amazon loses it. Yeah. Like it got delivered, or delivered, right? Yep. But it never went into receiving. It never went into receiving. It got delivered, and it sat there. And then pretty soon they just marked it as lost. And his whole shipment, his 4 boxes of his first shipment, gone.
Did he have receipts?
Oh, yeah, he did. And guess what happened on that?
They found it after
they found it. Yeah.
They
reimbursed him for the lost shipment. Yeah. And then they found it, and then they came back for the clawbacks, and they took all their money back. Yeah.
So which tells me these things tend to take care of themselves. Yeah. But when it's your first shipment or your first 10 shipments, you know everything that's happening in every one of those shipments. So it's going to hurt if one of those gets lost. You're going to notice. Yeah. Whereas, if you're sending 200 or 300 units a week, for instance, you're sending several shipments. One of those boxes gets lost. You're going to start dealing with that in process. It's not going to be a stop, halt everything situation, right? Which
brings me to another area where we could put a framework.
Okay.
And this is in the inventory recovery part of the business, right? Again, we didn't call it out as a core competency, but there is a step that you have here. We see it all the time where you send in a shipment. Amazon says, you said you sent 20, but we only found 15.
Yep.
Okay. So what do you do with that? Mm-hmm. First of all, you can't do anything. So when you're writing your procedure here or your framework, you can't do anything until that shipment gets closed.
Right.
Right. So step 1, is the shipment closed?
Yeah. So these are steps. Mm-hmm. What's the framework though? First, I want to see, what am I trying to
Starting
accomplish?
With the end in mind, I need to get my money back if they lose it.
Okay.
Right.
In order to do that, I need to identify that something's been lost. Mm-hmm. I need to
request with Amazon.
Request
reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Potentially negotiate, not negotiate value, but negotiate there's a back and forth with Amazon that happens frequently, right?
Yeah. And then I need to reconcile. When Amazon does give me my money back, I need to reconcile and make sure that I did get what they said they were going to give me. So that's framework.
Right. So identify, request, negotiate, reconcile.
Right.
Now,
the process for identifying
each of those is going to be definable by you.
Yes.
Right? How are you going to do this? When are you going to start looking at shipments that are closed that have discrepancies? Right. How are you going to go through that identification process? Are you going to be able to prove or provide everything? Hopefully, if you got your receiving frameworks down, then you have everything that you need to open up the case. Yeah. Right. And then there's the reconciliation process, which is, or maybe some back and forth there before we get to reconciliation, which is Amazon says, okay, we give, you'll get reimbursed within the next amount of time, 30 days, 45 days, whatever it is. And then you got to follow up on that to make sure that you got it, which is reconciliation. So you need, that's the high level framework, those 4 things. Mm-hmm. Now you build the process underneath that to make sure that you're getting what you set out to get.
Yes. So we have frameworks and we have processes that accomplish the framework that we've identified or we've developed, right? Yep. What good does this do us? Not only does it make us more efficient in every process that we do, in every task that we give ourselves, it allows us to start giving those tasks to others that to help us do our. Also, it covers us if, God forbid, we should get, in a car accident or something and be unable to run our business and need someone to help. If we have these things in place, they can see what our procedures are based on what framework, what are we really trying to accomplish. How many people have ever been in jobs where you've been told by your people, or you are the people telling your bosses that, look, if I understood why you're doing this, I think I could do a better job. Mm-hmm. You're just telling me to take these steps, but I need to understand why we're doing this so that I can catch something that maybe was a nuance there that you didn't realize was important when you made the framework. Why am I doing this? I need to know the framework that you're trying to get as opposed to the step by step. So I know why I'm trying to come. This is what we're trying to put together, is something that you can give to others to help you, or that you don't have to recreate every time you sit down and at your computer. Your efficiency is really low when you do that. When you decide every time.
We talk about this too, about having the framework that you can use with the processes defined underneath of that, so that you're following the same process every single time. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not following the same process, and it's like, because it was after 4 p.m. on Tuesday, you did it differently. Well, how is anyone going to come behind you and understand the logic behind why you did that? If you've got your frameworks and you've got your process, it's really easy to hand off to someone, or someone else can come in behind you and pick up where you left off.
And we know this because when we started having people come and help us in our business and hiring people and contracting with people, we realized quickly that we needed to have something in place. Otherwise, we would just be holding their hands the whole time, making a different decision every time.
Our scope is huge. Our scope is the entire business. When we're outsourcing something to someone, or a contractor, whatever's coming into our business, an employee, their scope is very small. Right? So we need to, we understand.
Their motivation is very small for the business compared to ours.
We have big picture understanding. They don't. So again, helping them maybe understand, starting with the end in mind, why are we doing this? And here's the process for doing it. And we follow this every single time, no matter what. I mean, maybe there are some exceptions.
Yeah. Exceptions are exceptions, though.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So it's because, and
they know when they come across something that doesn't fit within the framework, they know that they have to, this is an exception. They have to get our okay to move forward with it or not.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's the exception.
Yeah.
So the purpose of that is, we've found to be true as well, is that we can have other people help us.
We
know what we're trying to accomplish and can explain that.
Here's another thing that comes up a lot. And a lot of this is, again, starting with the end in mind. We want to avoid IP complaints. We want to avoid authenticity problems. We want to avoid having to get into potentially, I don't know that we can avoid Section 3s, but we can make sure we can get out of.
Any of that completely, probably. I mean, business is business.
But one of the things we can do to help avoid those things is make sure we're selling on the correct types of listings, right? So we put a framework in place that we call the pre-flight inspection here, that checks 3 things, sometimes 4, if you have any questions, to make sure that you're not going to mess it up. Make sure that you're not sending in items on misbranded listings. Make sure you're not sending in.
If I'm going to ever consider testing this item, putting this item in my inventory, I need to make sure of a few basic things.
That you need to have a way to avoid getting on confusing listings, right? Avoid getting on misbranded listings.
What does that mean to you?
Right. What, are you asking me?
No, I'm saying you have to decide what that means to you, right?
Well, I mean, it's...
What is it? What?
It's not...
Like we were talking this morning, we were looking 2 different places for what the brand, what's in the brand field.
Yeah.
There are a couple of places with the tools that we use that you can find that. And we found that we were looking in 2 different places.
I got schooled is what she's trying to say.
Well... Definitive is definitive, Brian.
Yes.
I'm pretty methodical, and you're sort of not. Always.
No, I was methodical. I was very methodical. I was just pulling the brand from a different place than you were.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's all.
The point is, you decide what that means to you.
Yeah.
Whether it's a yes or a no, what data you're using to come up with that.
So those directions and frameworks that you give to the people who are helping you, you need to establish them yourself so that you make sure you're doing it all right and it works. Then hand it off to other people. This is usually what we love to see when you start approaching about 6 to 9 months in, when you're doing $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a month in sales. You want to start getting some time back in your life. Bam, have a framework that with a process that you can hand off to someone and start with the end in mind, give them the framework, the why, and then the process. It makes a lot more sense.
I like to see people consider themselves the boss and the employee, depending on what they're doing at that moment. So as if I'm doing my own shopping, for instance, my boss, me, told me that I need to shop at these places. I need to make sure that sources have this or that. I need, this certain framework. My employee, me, says, okay, I need to go and accomplish this task and follow this procedure. In the beginning, you are the employee and the boss. You make the decisions how to do it, and you actually do this work. As you grow, you'll still make the decisions on how to do it, but you'll have someone else doing the work, and you won't have to put on that hat as often.
Yep. All right. I think we've kicked that horse a few times. Good.
Frameworks and procedures.
Frameworks and procedures, really important to scaling your business.
And really, we just want people to start thinking about these things and how important they are to your business and how you can build efficiencies through them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
So do you have a quote for us today, Brian?
I do have a quote. This comes to us from Brian Tracy, one of my favorite motivational authors.
Because his name is Brian?
No, just because he's everything he does is so on the nose.
Eat that frog, right?
Yes, of Eat That Frog fame.
Yes, we've read a lot of and listened to a lot of his content, and I like him. What did he say?
So this quote says, the distance between dreams and reality is called action.
Wow.
Action.
Yeah, that's pretty simple.
It is like the most simple thing, and we can think about it. We have a tendency to try to find motivation all the time. I need daily motivation. I need this. I need it, instead of actually taking action. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for the thing that strikes us. Yeah. We're looking for the perspective. And I think this is totally fine, by the way.
Yeah.
I think until you find something that spurs you to action, you should keep looking for whatever it is that's going to spur you to action.
Yeah. At the same time, take action. Some action every day.
But you have to take some action. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard the right message. I haven't gotten the right perspective on this. A lot of times you'll get it just from doing some stuff as well.
Right. We all have to practice. The practice is often not the fun part, right?
Well, if you fall in love with it, I think it is the fun part. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Sourcing, right? You fall in love with sourcing. Yeah. We both did. I mean, that is fun for us. Well, that's why we do a lot of it ourselves in our business still. Because that's one of the things we like to do. But we can't do all of it because we don't have the time as to be the employee.
No, we could, but we decided not to. Mm-hmm. When you decide, a lot of things can happen too.
Yeah. But action brings clarity.
Action brings clarity. You're right. And what is the number one action step here when you're building your first book of business?
Go find some ASINs to test.
Go test some more ASINs.
Test some ASINs.
Yes.
Let's go do that.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
We're going to go test some more ASINs. Bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us for today's episode. But before I let you go, let's spend a couple minutes with my good friend, Mr. Jeff Schick of jeffschick.com, just like the razor. Yeah. They offer a service for a retainer, monthly retainer, that covers all of your legal and policy questions. They can help you with anything you get into where you want to bounce off and are the ASINs that I'm about to sell against legitimate? Is this a legitimate brand I should be selling? Those kind of questions. They can help you with that. So, Jeff, what do you got for us today along those lines?
So, well, I'd say almost 2 years ago, you and I were having discussions about misbranded ASINs, and Amazon was starting to enforce it against sellers. And then things went dark with Amazon. Every so often things would pop up. And, before each Q4, Amazon usually cleans up the catalog a bit. And so this past week, we've now been seeing them come back on again and suspend people for misbranded ASINs. So what that means, what is a misbranded ASIN? It's pretty much what it sounds like, but a good explanation is anything that's not accurate. So for instance, if you have an Apple iPhone and you're selling Apple iPhones and the brand name is specified as Apple products or Apple iPhone, that's misbranded because the brand name should be Apple. Just like if you're selling Nike, the correct brand name on a pair of Nike shoes is Nike, not Nike Men's, not Nike Active, not Nike Basketball, not Nike anything. It's just Nike. Mm-hmm. So if it's misbranded, has extra words added to it, if it's misspelled, for instance, like Trader Joe's, we've been seeing Trader Joe's products misbranded as TJ or TJ apostrophe S. That's not correct. It's Trader Joe's, not TJ's. If it's got any sort of misbranding, you want to stay away from it. You don't want to list on it. Obviously, misspellings too. So, Adidas is ADIDAS.
There you go.
So, if you were to see ADDIDAS, then that would be a problem. That's considered misbranded as well. So
part of checking the validity, make sure that the brand is spelled correctly, that it looks like the other great listings that people are selling against for that brand. Right. And if it's not, avoid it. That's part of your pre-ASIN checklist to see if this is a valid ASIN that you should even be considering or not.
Exactly. And another good rule of thumb too, if a brand has brand registry, and they've got it where it says, visit the Nike store, for instance, when you're looking at a product. If you find a product that says brand Nike, but then another product is visit the Nike store, that is a huge red flag that it's misbranded. Because if it's properly branded, it should be under the main storefront of the rest of the brand's products.
Great tip. So when someone gets suspended for these, give us some scenarios of like, what's that like? What happens? What are you seeing?
So it's really variable. Some sellers get back and some don't. So Amazon considers it to be a form of fraud. They believe that it's fraudulently misleading consumers to buy the wrong product, and so they view that's it's considered a fraud case. There's no 72-hour notice, and it's you're kind of the back of the bus for them to look at appeals. They tend to prioritize sellers that don't commit fraud offenses at getting back on the platform before sellers that they perceive have committed fraud offenses. So that means it's going to take longer, and there's always a chance they might not give you a second chance. So you really want to do your due diligence on the front end, but also do routine audits. Audit your inventory. Going into Q4 is a great time to go in, look at all your listings, make sure they're correct. And the biggest rule of advice I can give people is if you find something incorrect, delete it and remove the inventory. The worst thing you can do is find it, try to sell it out because you want to make some money off of it, and then lose your entire account over it because you fire saled it and tried to sell it out, instead of taking care of the problem. Amazon tends to give people second chances. If you find something, you delete it, and then they later suspend you for it, they look very favorably on the fact that, hey, at least you did find it and delete it. And now we just want a plan of action to explain it, why that happened and how it won't happen again. Whereas sellers who find it, fire sale it, get caught, tend to not get that second chance as readily.
And one of the things we tell sellers all the time around here is if you're new, do not set up new ASINs under any circumstances. Do not set up new listings on Amazon, because the odds of you doing something wrong, including misbranding it, like, oh, if I change Trader Joe's to TJ's, I can get through the branding gate, right? No. And then someone else comes along and sells against that ASIN once it takes off. And now everybody is in this bucket of fraudulent sellers.
Right.
So you can make a real mess real fast. Make sure you're looking at legitimate ASINs. There are millions of legitimate ASINs that you can sell against, but there's also a whole bunch of them out there that are being cleaned up over time that you definitely shouldn't be stepping on. So that's what good training and having someone on your team like Jeff and his team to help you avoid and navigate these things. That's why it's so important. So yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well. Anything else to say on this one, Jeff?
I think that's it. That's just really, it should be the pre-listing checklist, but also the routine audits, because ASINs can change. And if you're not using software and that monitors for those ASIN changes, then you need to do the process manually. People I know are going to now start emailing, what software do I recommend? I'll go ahead and put it out there. I don't recommend software on that, because there's no singular software out there that is the best in that category. Usually it's bundled in with more expensive software platforms that offer a lot of tools that are geared mainly to private label sellers that resellers might not need. So it's kind of, if it's worth it to you, then certainly, do your due diligence and invest in the software, but the process can very easily be done manually too. And especially if you have VAs.
Great. Yeah, great tip. And there's a good number of tools out there that claim to be able to monitor the ASINs in your catalog and let you know if anything changes, right? So that's some research maybe you need to do, or like you said, just do an audit and go through and look at them all from time to time. Yeah, right. Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate you, Jeff. Every week you come on with some great stuff for us, and thank you for being a great sponsor of the show as well. JeffSchick.com, spelled just like the razor, SCHICK, JeffSchick.com. Put him and his team on retainer so you can sleep well at night knowing someone else is in your corner should any of these things pop up. Appreciate you, Jeff. We'll do it again next week, man.
Sounds good. Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Talk to you then.